2, 1.
New York, NY. LaunchPod starts now.
Welcome to the New York LaunchPod, the New York Press Club award-winning podcast on the most interesting new startups, businesses, and openings in the New York City area. I'm your host and New York attorney, Hal Cooper-Smith. And in this episode, we speak to Maria Luisa Mendiola, founder of MIGA Swimwear, a company focused on body positivity with designs for people with disfigurement and other chronic health issues. And Maria has an interesting journey to starting her company.
Because it all comes down to, this idea that our body has to look a certain way, that if we have some sort of health condition, we shouldn't tell people. And then I'm trying to change that. That's such a big part of our mission, because for so long, I myself felt like I couldn't be forthright of what my health condition was because I was scared of what it meant for me, for my future children. And I just don't want people to go through that.
But before we go to the interview, if you haven't already, remember to sign up for our monthly newsletter and unique content and insights at nylaunchpod.com and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening app. And we have a sponsor, ResQ, New York's premier residential rental compliance platform. Have you rented out residential property in New York State? If so, odds are that you are not compliant with the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act enacted by New York State in 2019. And if you don't follow the law, there may be serious consequences. Your tenant could stay beyond the length of the lease. You may not be able to raise your rent by a desired amount, or you may be forced to pay for damages out of your own pocket instead of the security deposit. ResQ is designed to solve all of that and more. Go to resqme.com and enter in some basic lease information, and ResQ takes care of the rest so you can relax and be a more profitable landlord. That's resqme.com, ResQueme.com. And with that, let's go to the interview. So you decided to start a different form of swimwear line. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So MIGA Swimwear comes from my personal experience with having a disfigurement or a body difference. I was born with short fourth toes, so my feet look very differently in my footprint as well. And I always felt very self-conscious when I would go to the beach or the pool. I would hide my feet as much as possible. I wouldn't wear flip-flops. And it wasn't until I started my master's in design at Central St. Martin's that I started playing with the idea of creating garments that could empower you to share your story. Because I found out that one of the reasons why I was so passionate about swimwear is because I would pick bold, colorful swimwear to kind of detract from my difference. And so I kind of wanted to flip swimwear on its head and use it actually as a way to be much more direct with what your difference is, and as a way to empower you and make you feel much more comfortable when you're wearing bathing suits. Because when you're wearing bathing suits, you're kind of almost naked, right? It's a very vulnerable experience. And so I just started thinking how awesome would it be to create a swimwear brand that helps you own whatever you think makes you different negatively and turn that into a positive.
How are your designs made to empower the people who wear them?
Yeah. So we work directly with our community. We make no assumptions of what can make you feel comfortable about going to the beach or the pool. And so the way that it works is that we crowdsource our designs. At the beginning of every single one of our collections, we send out a survey to our community members, and anyone can join. So if any of your listeners wants to join, we're here. But we ask very simple questions like, what do you think would make you feel much more comfortable about going to the beach or the pool? What part of your body do you feel the most insecure, and why is that? And from the stories that we get, we select a couple of stories and then name the bathing suits after them. So for example, the Colette, which is the tankini set in lime green that we currently have online, it's inspired on this woman who was born with a rare condition that caused her butt to be asymmetrical. And she always felt very self-conscious going to the beach or the pool. And so what we did for her is that she asked us for a skirt. Also within her design, a lot of people asked for tankini, specifically wheelchair users. So we decided to make a more, I like to think, a cooler tankini, because a lot of the tankinis you see out there in the market have a lot of frills and a lot of just, it comes in like dark colors only. And so we wanted to make it something like vibrant and cool to really empower women to, be able to relax in these spaces that, again, because of my experience and because of the amount of women that I've gotten the opportunity to meet that have different conditions, whether it's a burn scar or they feel very self-conscious about their cellulite, whatever it is, hearing all these stories, the experience is very similar. And so by crowd designing, all of our styles, we're able to get more people to, designs out there that make more people feel comfortable when they go to these places that should be relaxing.
So I love the idea that you're creating community. I feel like your designs are certainly built for that. And creating community for a brand, I think, is very important. And certainly a lot of people are talking about that. But where did you start? Because I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg. Did you start with the community first and then the designs, or you had your first design and then built a community?
Community first, because for me, it was a quest to find other people that had gone through a similar experience. Growing up, I got a lot of comments like, oh, like, your feet is, your short toe, like no one can notice. And like, people definitely notice, people definitely ask questions. And I always felt so self-conscious. And I was like, there has to be other people who have experienced, just even random people asking you like, what's wrong with X part of your body? And, by finding pockets of, honestly, like the strongest and most resilient women that I've ever gotten to meet, I started to become clear to me that we needed to create a brand around this feeling of overcoming whatever it is that you feel negative towards your body. Because obviously, like the way that you build your body image or like your body esteem, which are like the perceptions that you have about your body and how others react to how your body looks, is something that is incredibly personal. And so I thought, well, what if we could create like a platform where people could share these stories? And so not only do we share the stories through the swimwear and that way, raise awareness and also empathy towards these different conditions, but then you also have the other part, which is our blog. And while we were, trying to figure out our whole supply chain, the blog is truly what kept it cohesive, how we started to build a community. And also I want to like say here, like the importance of social media in me helping me find people, whether it was people who had the same rare condition that caused them to have feet like mine, or how comprehensive it is, the experience. So like people who have like psoriasis, eczema, people who have burn injuries, people who have different chronic illnesses like ulcerative colitis. Like social media opened that door to start creating that community before the product. So by the time we did the Kickstarter campaign, we already had that community rallying after us, which went, hand in hand.
So I kind of feel like you have a natural sense of community as opposed to other brands, which could be a little bit more of an advantage. But you talked about building your community on social media. How did you go about building the community first? Because you said that was the first thing that you did do. How did you find the tribe, so to speak?
One of the wonders of being a student, right, is that you can knock on anyone's door and people, I think, are much more open to reaching back out. So when I decided that I wanted to focus on finding community of people who look differently, I started working with actually a burns unit in the UK. And that's when I started finding our first volunteers. Actually, one of our volunteers has become a really tremendous advocate for people who look differently. Her name is Sylvia Mack. And so this was back in 2016 where I started meeting patients from this burns unit who had been reaching out to the people who work in the burn unit saying, hey, do you know anyone who makes swimwear with specific cuts so that it offers me SPF protection, but also, they offer some coverage because I'm not ready to show my scars. And that's kind of how it started. So I met some patients through there, or like people that had been previously patients, but have since then left the burns unit. I then started working with other organizations, and that has been a part of it, working with organizations like Changing Faces UK, like Global Genes here in the US. But then I also kind of complemented with social media, because social media, as a lot of us know, like has democratized what content we find out there. And so people who were already like all about, this is my story and I'm going to own it, because there's something super important that happens once you own your story. I mean, this business has been incredibly, I like to say, it's selfish because of this business. The first thing that you know about me was, the biggest secret that I had, which was that I have a genetic condition that caused me to have different feet. And so I started also looking for people in social media who understood that there's so much good that can come out from sharing your story, that want to have that courage to come out and just tell their story. And so finding these people online was actually easier than I thought. Whether it was like Facebook groups, mostly like Instagram is where I started to reach out to people, being like, hey, like I love how you're telling your story, and I wonder if you would like to tell it in our community. And so one of the examples is this lady, Jenny, who I met through social media, who then wrote a blog for us on what it's like dating with having a facial difference and her experience on dating apps. And then Jenny now not only was one of our Kickstarter supporters, but then she also has purchased a swimsuit. So then you have, these are people who feel seen and felt connected, and also feel like we were one of the first people there backing MIGA Swimwear. And I think that loyalty is something that is so important to us. Right now, I'm like kind of like toying with the idea of creating a kind of like loyalty group within the community of people who've been there since day one, and bringing more people in and making sure that people who or may not have experience with having a disability or disfigurement also feel included and also want to help us in crowd design. Because obviously the problem of not feeling comfortable in your body is a universal issue, right? It's not something that affects people who have disfigurements like I or disabilities.
So you talked about how swimwear can be empowering, and that's why you wanted to start there. But do you have any plans to go to different forms of attire?
Absolutely. I mean, we also get a lot of questions by a lot of men that have ostomy bags. We've had also men who have burn scars have reached out, because there's this market there that hasn't been tapped yet, where we're expecting more from a product, right? And I think COVID-19 has kind of brought health and how we can be healthier and how we can keep our communities healthy to the forefront. And so now we're going to be expecting more from our products. So currently all of our bathing suits have SPF 50 protection. They're made to last. They're very durable. They have antibacterial treatments on them. But what I think is going to happen now with COVID-19 is we're going to see the customer demanding more. And when you're making less purchases, but the purchases that you're doing have much more of an intent. So in the future, we definitely want to go into not only resort wear and other types of clothing, but definitely too like menswear, and making sure that, again, we're telling these stories so more people feel represented.
Why do you think there are very few players in this market?
It's a difficult market.
What's difficult about it?
I think the first thing is health conditions, right? There's such a stigma around having a health condition. When you say that they're adaptive clothing, meaning it's universal, it can be used for anyone. If anything, it's easier to put on. Like take, for example, our Anna one piece that has a really long pole in the back so you can easily close the zipper. That benefits anybody. But sometimes when you use the word adaptive, people who are not disabled may think, well, this is not for me. And because having certain health conditions carries such stigma, because it all comes down to, like this idea that our body has to look a certain way, that if we have some sort of health condition, like we shouldn't tell people. And then like, I'm trying to change that. Like that's such a big part of our mission, because for so long, I myself felt like I couldn't be forthright of what my health condition was because I was scared of what it meant for me, for my future children. And I just don't want people to go through that. So that's why I think this market is so tough, is because everything should be universal. We shouldn't need to have an adaptive brand. Anything should be, taking into account people that have limited mobility. But that's not the case. And it's not the case because that information hasn't been there. And people who have disabilities are also not in the decision rooms of where these collections are being done. And so that's why it's so important that we do crowd design, because I shouldn't be telling you what's going to make you feel comfortable to the beach or the pool. Like as a designer, my job in this world is to take the information that I'm given and make sure that we are fulfilling that demand.
So how many different designs do you have at the moment?
So at the moment, we have 5 designs. These 5 designs, as I said, have been crowdsourced. So 5 designs means 5 different stories. Each bag has a name of the woman that has shared their story, and each bathing suit comes with a canvas bag that details the person's story. But the 5 styles are a representation of a bunch of requests that we received. So as I mentioned, we got a lot of requests, for example, for people that have different skin conditions that can cause certain discomforts in the armpits. So we made sure that, like, for example, all of our long sleeves have raglan sleeves, and then there's no seams at your armpit, so that's comfortable. We also got a lot of requests for more coverage, like long sleeves. So we did that. And as I also mentioned too, we also got requests from people who are wheelchair users to make a tankini.
So you have this obstacle of you have different audiences and different demands for a product. And then you also talked about destigmatizing your designs. How are you able to market to both people with different body types and conditions, as well as a larger audience?
That's a great question. And to be completely honest, that's something that, like, I'm still trying to find the answer, just because there's so much stigma around terms like, disability or adaptive wear. Where we are right now is we at first were very focused on being mission led and focused on saying that we were being inclusive of people with different health conditions. And now we have pivoted into being a brand that focuses on making people feel comfortable and confident when going to the beach or the pool, regardless of whether they have a health condition or not. And that has been a way for us to make sure that we're not losing people who, for example, are able-bodied, because that is a huge part of our mission, to make sure that people have somewhat of an understanding, so that, once they're in a room with someone who has a disability, they feel much more equipped to have a conversation. Because there's so much misunderstandings and generalizations and stereotypes of what the disability community looks like and can achieve. So I think that by sharing the stories that we share of our community, we're able to overcome that. But we're not able to overcome that if we're losing half of the people that we're supposed to be having these conversations with, right? So the way that we've been doing it right now is we're also working with big retailers that have focused on adaptive lines, so that they can help us find more customers in that group. And then we can do a DTC, continue to being DTC for everyone else. But again, this is just very early stages. This year, we hired a marketing agency to just get a better understanding on how we could position and better communicate our brand's mission and what we're trying to do. So it's a work in progress.
Do you have any manufacturing difficulties that a traditional manufacturer or direct-to-consumer brand would not have?
As of right now, no. But as we start to work with more magnets and different types of trims, that might be the case. The hardest manufacturing part of our process that we had this year is that we were doing bathing suits with snaps for the belt that is inspired by a woman who has ulcerative colitis and has a stoma bag. But I think as we go deeper into adaptive wear, the trims are going to become much more difficult, just because it takes a specific supplier to do that. And also, like, the trims are sometimes harder to source. I mean, if you would have asked me this question like 3 years ago, it was so hard. I did not have a background in production, and I had this kind of like learn as I go attitude that really, when it comes to production, you just really need someone who knows what they're doing. And so I just look back at it and think, how lost I was. And now I think, it really took a lot of hard knocks and getting, humble about asking people for help. And that's actually how we were able to find our production dream team, which made it then easier to execute on the designs that I had and make sure that we were taking into account every single detail that our community asked us to do. So now I'm so confident of where our product is, but I would have not been able to, like, again, 3 years ago, that would have not been my answer.
So you talked about the stories in terms of creating the designs. You talked about your own story. In terms of the community and having a line just for your target audience, individuals with disabilities and disfigurement, what does this brand mean to them?
All I can think of is feeling seen. And these feelings of arriving, like I have arrived to my destination where I needed to be. The experience of feeling like you're the only one that struggles with, part of your body, or feeling like misunderstood and isolated is something that is very common. And getting to hear the feedback from our community members, feedback like, I hadn't been back swimming since my change in appearance, and now I was able to go back swimming with my 8-year-old son. I think we take, not for granted, but like we really don't understand how therapeutic being in a body of water or taking the time that goes with being close to a beach or to a pool, and the effects that has on us. And so making sure that our members feel as comfortable and as confident as they can in their own body as is, and getting to hear those reviews is truly like what makes our journey worth it.
Well, that is a wonderful note to end things on. Maria Luisa Mendiola, thank you for stepping onto the New York Launch Pod and sharing your time with us. How do people find out more about you and MIGA Swimwear?
Yeah, so you guys can find us at migaswimwear.com. We're also on Instagram, and we're offering a 15% discount to your audience members with code NYLaunch.
Well, our audience will certainly very much appreciate that. And if you want to learn more about the New York Launch Pod, you can follow us on social media at NY Launch Pod. And for transcripts of every episode, including this one, you can visit nylaunchpod.com. And if you are a super fan of the New York Launch Pod, Maria, are you a super fan of the New York Launch Pod?
I am.
If you're a super fan like Maria, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It is greatly appreciated and does help people discover the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the New York Launch Pod. For more information, please visit nylaunchpod.com.